Pro. The next week passed by slowly, though oddly enough there was no sign of Casey. This worried Devon some, and because of this throughout the week he resumed his usual sadly disposition. Unfortunately, she never showed up around school, and when Friday came around, Devon was sure that he would not see Casey again. When he arrived to detention with Miss Humphrey, she was there, sitting in the corner. Everything was the same as last Friday, other than what Miss Humphrey wore in the desks. One was in the corner, the other in the corner diagonal Casey, near Miss Humphrey's desk. No doubt she placed it there so that Devon could not speak to Casey during the detention. Smart. Devon took a seat in the open desk, the one nearest Miss Humphrey, and Casey, though it appeared as if she wanted to, did not dare to look over to him. When Devon had seated himself, Miss Humphrey looked over to him and spoke. "Stare at this corner," she said, "and if I see you looking over at her," she said, pointing to Casey, "or trying to talk to her," she pointed more intently, "then I will hit you." "Hit me," said Devon. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'll hit you," she said, an evil grin crossing her face. "In the head, and if you tell anyone about it," she paused for a moment, "I will tell them that she did it." She pointed again. "And you think they'll believe you?" Devon asked. "They will," she said, "coming from me, of course." Devon gulped. "I'll just keep my head forward." "Good," said Miss Humphrey. "You know what happens if you don't." Devon turned to face the wall. He was nothing short of outraged, but he thought it best to simply go along with the instruction. That way, he figured, nothing would get out of hand. Besides, Casey was there, and when detention was over, maybe she would want to hang out again. Miss Humphrey's detention passed relatively smoothly, and fortunately, Devon gave her no reason to hit him, whatever that meant exactly. Afterwards, he and Casey walked out together to another reminder of their next detention next Friday. At this point, however, Devon didn't even mind. He was just glad to see Casey. This time he would give her his number, he thought to himself, though he quickly forgot. That way they could talk over the week if he didn't see her again, as he hadn't liked waiting over the week, obviously. On the walk back to his house, he asked her if she'd like to hang out again, and she said yes to Devon's delight, so he thought of the variant games that they might play together for that short window of time before he knew that she had to go. Maybe the same one, he thought, or perhaps another, something less scary. She hadn't seemed frightened by the game, no, so perhaps another horror game. Devon did particularly enjoy horror games. Maybe if he... Casey had stopped. Devon, a few paces ahead, looked back, and there she was, standing, and... What was she doing? She was crying. Not sobbing, but a few tears did run down each of her cheeks, from each of her eyes, pattering as they fell upon the sidewalk. She tried to wipe them away, but they returned nonetheless. But why? Why was she crying? Devon had no words for her, and he didn't know why he did it or why it seemed to come so naturally in that moment, but he walked up to her and hugged her tightly as she pressed her face into his shirt, wetting it with her tears. Devon didn't mind. How could he? With a soft whisper, he told her to take his hand, and hand in hand they walked to Devon's house, a short walk now from where they had stopped. When they arrived, as usual, no one was home. Perhaps then Devon thought it would be okay to bring her in the front door, as he did not know how his parents would react. He thought better of it. Instead, he took her inside the same side door as it was faster. Once inside, he set her down on the couch and began to rummage through his inventory of games. "Here," he said, "this one's perfect." Casey looked up to him, still crying, though it had lessened. "What is it?" she asked, wiping her tears or her eyes with her sleeve. "It's an adventure game," Devon said excitedly, though quickly frowning upon seeing that Casey was yet crying. "Here," he said, trying to sound cheery, "I'll show you." The name of the game was Adventurescape, a title that was obvious enough. Devon could tell that Casey was curious about it, and he doubted that she'd ever played any game quite like it. At least she wasn't crying so much. Perhaps, however, she wouldn't like it, though Devon hoped that she would. And in any case, he put the game into the console, handed Casey a controller, and grabbed one for himself, as it was a two-player game. When the game started up, Casey immediately began to ask questions about it. What did you do in the game? What were you looking for? Who were you? What was the goal of it? Devon tried to explain it to her as best he could, but soon enough he realized it would be better just to show her as they progressed further in the game. It was the kind of game that you spent hours and hours playing, and there was no real objective, but instead many objectives, and one could choose what he or she wanted to do within the realm of the game. Devin tried to explain this to Casey, and even though she was playing it, she still seemed confused, or maybe dumbfounded. Perhaps she had never thought that it was possible to do such things, and in reality she would have been right, but within Adventurescapes and anything within the bounds of the game, it actually was possible. Devin wanted to show her that, and he did. They spent the next 2 or 3 hours playing the game, and still no one had arrived home. Devin thought that peculiar, but it was Friday, so it was possible that his parents were having a date night. He had no siblings, so there was no one there to bother the two of them. Instead, there was Casey and himself, and they were having a blast playing this game, this adventure, though after a while, it's true, Casey did seem to grow bored of it. When Devin noticed, he asked her, "Done with the game?" Casey nodded shyly, "I think so." Devin nodded as well. "What do you want to play?" She grinned a little in a strange, nervous sort of way. She said, "What about the game from last Friday?" "Only in daylight?" "Yes," she said oddly. "Let's play that." Devin gave her a look but shrugged it off and replied, "Okay, sure." In a moment, Devin had retrieved the game from his collection and returned Adventurescape to its rightful location, on the shelf where all the video games stood, ready to be played. He wandered over to the TV, sat down to put the game into the G500, and looked over to Casey, who waited, a look of eager anticipation on her face. For some reason, she really wanted to play this game, though Devin was unsure as to why. In fact, he was surprised that she wasn't more afraid to play it, because most girls would have been, but she wasn't. Something about it, he supposed, really hit home with her. Perhaps she simply enjoyed the rush of the fear that the game provoked in her and most people who played it. Devin knew that he did, though sometimes it would give him nightmares, admittedly. He wasn't going to tell Casey that, of course, even though he had a sneaking suspicion that it wouldn't have mattered. She was into him, so he was in the clear, right? "Is it ready?" she asked, innocently enough, giving Devin an eerie feeling, given the game she was asking about. How could someone so quiet and nice enjoy such a game so much? And surely when he handed her a controller, she began the game almost immediately, eyes wide open, and fingers mashing buttons in a frenzied attempt to get out of the house in which the game took place, dodging the various monsters, and of course the main monster, the mother. Thinking about it gave Devin chills, part of what he liked about the story, but Casey, today, had no fear, or seemingly so, as she pressed on in the game, making her way towards the end of the house, and within the hour, she was out. She'd beaten the game. Devin looked over at her, surprised. He never had, but then he had a thought. He smiled. "You didn't play this game over the week, did you?" She shook her head. "Nope." "You sure?" he asked. "You got pretty good at it." "I was good before, too," she countered. "True," said Devin, "but not that good." She shrugged. I guess that I'm a quick learner." "You know," Devin said, "I never asked, but why were you placed in detention?" "Why were you?" she countered, once again a defensiveness coming out of her, which, as far as Devin could tell, was unusual of her. Immediately after she'd said it, she seemed to try to make herself smaller, looking down at her shoes on the floor to avoid eye contact, as if she were ashamed. "Sorry," she apologized. Devin shrugged. "I was late to homeroom." "That's all?" she said, sort of surprised. "Wow." Devin nodded. "Miss Humphrey isn't exactly a fair person. Ever wonder why?" "Pfft," Devin nearly spat. "Not for her." "You don't like her?" she asked. "Of course not, don't you?" Casey looked away for a moment and then shook her head. "I just figured that something bad happened to her and now she's like how she is." "I'm not so sympathetic," Devin said, leaning back and closing his eyes, letting out a cold, tired breath. "Why not?" she asked. Devin shrugged. "Do I have to be?" "No," said Casey. "No, you don't have to be." "Good." Devin sighed again, his eyes still closed. In a moment he felt the couch shift, and before he could open both eyes, Casey had planted a kiss on his cheek. Devin nearly jumped off of the couch, but caught himself. Immediately, Casey sat back in her original position next to Devin. "That was awkward," she said after a second. "You didn't like it?" Devin nodded, gulping. "Just didn't see that coming, that's all." "Oh," she said, blushing. "I'd better go." Devin nodded. "I'll see you out." "That's okay," Casey said nervously, standing up to leave. "Wait," said Devin. Casey stopped and turned to look at him, holding one of her arms with her hand. "Yeah, next week," Devin asked. "Do you want to come over?" "I have detention again," she said, "so I suppose so, yes." "Cool," Devin smiled. Casey smiled as well, and then she left. Devin leaned back on the couch. The game's credits had ended, and the monster in the game, the mother, stared back at him from the start screen. A shudder ran through Devin's body, and he got a chill. He walked up to it, stupidly cautious, and turned off the console, sitting back down on the couch, an eerie feeling creeping throughout his body. He blinked. "Well, all right."